Hello everyone. Can everyone can hear me? You can use the chat to tell me if you can hear me correctly. And you should be able to see just kind of like a image right now, the poster image. We'll be starting in, let's say, 2 minutes. All right, let me go ahead and set up some stuff. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That should be big enough, hopefully. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so a little bit of my introduction. My name is Mohammad Azam, and I have been developing for quite some time now. Actually, you can go to my website, azamsharp.com, and currently I work as a bootcamp instructor. Apart from that, I have written 3 or 4 books. I also have a lot of different courses on Udemy. You can actually go to my website, azamsharp.com, click on courses, and you can take a look at all the courses that I have developed. And apart from that, I'm currently always working on some new course, and I also maintain a popular YouTube channel, which I guess we are on right now. All right. And today's session will be about core data and how you can get started with core data with a SwiftUI application. Now, this will be a very, very basic session on core data. So we will not be doing any one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, nothing crazy. Just going to show you how you can create a record in core data, how you can delete, and how you can read. All right, basic stuff. All right, okay. So I have created this application, which is a SwiftUI project. You can see that this project does not really have anything. I mean, it's kind of like completely from start. It's like just the default code that has been added. So the first thing I need to do is I need to initialize my core data stack. If I don't initialize my core data stack, then I won't be able to use it. Now, I guess we can also talk about what exactly is core data. If you are new to core data is a framework, it's a built-in framework from Apple. So you don't really have to download any dependency or anything. It's a built-in framework from Apple, and it allows to persist, meaning save, an object graph into a different storage. All right. So core data is not a database. Core data is a framework that can persist the storage, that can persist the object graph into database like SQLite, XML, binary, JSON. I mean, all of these, and custom. I think JSON you have to do custom yourself if you want to save it somewhere else. So let's go ahead and get started with it. All right. Now we're building a very, 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 very simple application, nothing complicated. All right. So if you have ever worked with core data, you might say, okay, I already know this. That's great. But for people who are first in using core data, I think they will find it a little bit helpful. So the first thing we need to do with core data, since I'm building a to-do list application, I need to add a model. The model will represent that what exactly I'm planning to save into my core data, using my core data to my SQLite database. By default, since I'm not setting anything, it will always, core data by default will persist to SQLite database, which will be on my device. Meaning the database will be local and it will be on the device itself. It will not be on the cloud or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a data model. It is under core data category in your template. And let's go ahead and add it. And let's go ahead and name it something. You can name it anything you want. I'm just going to call it to-do model. Now, when you add this, and I don't think I can, sorry, I can't really magnify this, but once you add the to-do model, it will add, or it will show you this screen. This is where you can create your own entities. An entity basically represents that what you will be saving in core data. You're basically saying you're creating a model and you're saying that, okay, I want to take that model and I want to save the properties of that model into the database. Now, since I can't really magnify this, I'm just going to use these pointers. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a model using the add entity. You can see that it's giving us the name of the entity, which is right here, and it's calling it entity. I'm sorry, it's too small, I know, but I don't think there's any way to magnify this part. I will click on it and I will name it something else. I will name it task because I'm trying to save a task to my database, to my SQLite database using core data. All right, so I've named it task. That's my model. That's my entity called task. Over here, we have the attributes. Attributes simply mean the properties. So if you have a task, like a to-do task, what other properties a to-do task can have? Well, a to-do task can have many things, but we're making it simple. So a to-do task will have a title. This title can be, whatever the title of the to-do task can be. Mow the lawn, feed the cat, clean the car, do some grocery. In the type, we're going to select what will be the data type of this. So I'm going to just go ahead and say string because that's what we will be storing in there. All right. And now I can open up this and I can see some additional things related to you can see additional things related to the property or the attribute that I have selected. Right now I'm selecting title, so I can see all the different other properties which are related to that particular attribute. There is an attribute over here which is saying optional and it is marked as checked. I'm just going to remove that. I don't really want this to be optional, which means that you have to provide the title for a task that you're trying to save. There are some other checkboxes and other properties also over here. We're not going to use any of this right now. So that's the only one that we uncheck it. The other property that I'm going to add, which we may or may not use, is completed. Okay, and I'm going to mark this with Boolean. Now I don't know if we will be using is completed or not, but I'm just going to mark it with Boolean, meaning it's true or false. Is the task completed or not? Again, you can see the properties or the window opening, and it's telling me that is it optional? I'm just going to say no, it's not optional. And for the default value, I can select no, which means that it is not completed. So when you create a new task, it will not be completed. So the default value I have set to be no or false. All right. So this is it. This is our model that we have created. It's called task model, which is fine. That's the only model that we have. The next thing we need to do is we need to set the core data stack, which basically means that we need to do all the steps necessary to create our core data, to set up and load our core data stack. I'm going to go ahead and create another folder over here, and I will call it managers. And now inside the managers, I can go ahead and create a Swift file, and I will call it core data manager. The purpose of core data manager is to set up core data, to load core data so that the core data is initialized. So the first thing I'm going to do is import core data. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a class called Core Data Manager. The purpose of Core Data Manager is simply to initialize core data. And we are going to create a singleton for Core Data Manager, which means that it will be the same object always going to be returned to you. So I'm going to go ahead and make this Core Data Manager. And I will also create something called persistent container. Now, persistent container, it can be used or is used to initialize and load the core data. So we have to use that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a private initializer and initialize persistent container. You can see the persistent container, you need to pass in the name of the model file. So we will simply pass in the to-do model. So make sure that the model file does exist. In our case, you can see that it does. That's the name of the model that we're trying to be loading. The reason that I'm making the initializer private is that the only way we'll be able to access the core data manager will be through the shared property. And the shared property is marked with static, so it will create a singleton, meaning the only way you can access core data will be one object singleton using shared property. Next up, we're going to go ahead and call the load persistent stores, which is going to give us two different things, the description, which we don't really care about, and the error. If, however, there is some error, then we can go ahead and we can simply say error initializing core data, because there's nothing really we can do at that point, and we will display the error. So this code is going to allow you to initialize the core data stack, which is based on the model, which is the to-do model. Okay. All right. So the next part will be to use the core data manager, initialize it, and then make it available for our page so that we can create a to-do list task, we can display the to-do list task, we can probably delete a to-do list task, and so on. Now, in order to access core data manager, what we will do is we will simply go to our app over here. And in the app, we will create our core data manager. So let's go ahead and create the core data manager. Let core data manager equals to core data manager dot shared. Okay, now core data manager consists of a property called persistent container. So core data manager dot persistent container, but we're mostly interested in another property called view context, and that's the main property that we actually want. Now, what exactly is view context? Now, view context is actually one of the most important things in core data, and view context kind of keeps track of all the changes that you're doing to your models. And without view context, you will not be able to fetch anything, you will not be able to save anything. That's the main thing in core data, kind of like the heart of the core data, and it kind of keeps track of if you are adding new objects, if you're adding new tasks, deleting the task, you're updating a task, you're changing one property of a task. So view context is just making sure that everything is, everything that you're doing is being tracked with respect to core data, with respect to the models that you're changing. So everything is being tracked so that you can save them or update them. Once we get access to the view context, we can put it in the environment. I can go ahead and simply say environment key path, and I can simply put it in the environment by saying manage object context and passing in the view context. Now, since I have put it inside the environment, I will be able to access it from content view, and if there are any children of content view, I will be able to access it also from over there. Okay. Okay, so now let's move to our content view and try to access the manage object context, because without the manage object context, we will not be able to do anything. That's the thing that will keep track of which objects have been added to core data, which objects have been added to the context, which object needs to be saved, and all that stuff. So let's go to the content view. And inside the content view, I'm going to try to get access to the manage object context. Since we have put it inside the environment, I can just grab it from the environment. So I can say environment, and I can provide the same exact key that I provided earlier on, which is manage object context, private var, and then view context, which you can say anything you want. I'm just calling it view context. All right. Now we have the view context, and we can save a particular task, or we can get all the tasks. We can do anything we want. In order to do that, we need to update our interface. Interface kind of looks nothing. There's really nothing going on the interface. We can't really add anything. We don't have a text box to type some text. So let's go ahead and try to add some text over here. I'm going to go ahead and say text field, and just adding a text field, enter task, and whenever we are going to go ahead and enter something, it's going to go into task title. That's the binding format that we will be using. If you have done any SwiftUI, you are already hopefully familiar with how that works. This means that every time we're going to type something in the text box, that value that we type in the text box is going to go to the task title. That's the state property. Let's go ahead and refresh our interface, and hopefully we'll be able to see the text box. You can see the text box right there. Let's add a bit of a padding to it. And also let's change the text style to be rounded border. Okay, looks fine now. Another thing we need to add is obviously a button so that we can save something. So let's add a button. Button will have an action, and we can go ahead and say save. That can be, that is something that we can say that the button label will be. And the button style can be whatever, broad or prominent or something. And we can also give it, let's say, a frame of maximum width to be infinity. And now the button is like much larger, as you can see. All right. Okay. So we got the button, we got the text box, that's great. There is a click of the button. We can over here say save the task to the database, but we don't really have any code that will save the task to the database. It's completely empty right now. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to create an object of the task entity. Remember in to-do model, you created this task entity using this designer, which consists of two properties, is completed and title. Well, one of the things that core data does behind the scene is it automatically generates a class for you. And the reason it generates a class for you is that by default, the code generation option is set to class definition. That means that whatever entity that you're building, which in this case is task entity, then it is based on the entity, based on the attributes, based on the relationships, it's automatically going to create a class for you. And that is exactly what is happening over here, is that we are saying the task entity, and since the option is set to class definition, it's automatically creating the class for you behind the scene. So now if I go to the content view, I will be able to create a class. You can see that the class will just magically appear. This is our entity model class. And in order to create that, we can actually pass in the context, which we already have. This means that now the context will be tracking this particular object, the task object. Let's go ahead and add something to this task object. Task.title equals to task title, whatever we enter in the database. By default, the is completed should be false. So we don't really want to set it over here. If we don't want to, that's fine, hopefully. All right. So we created the task object on line number 22. We set its property title to be task title, which is coming from the text box. The only final thing remaining is to use the view context and save it. So whatever is on the view context, whether it is a task, whether it is something else, everything will be saved. Everything in that context will be persisted or saved. Now, when we call the save function on the view context, it does require that we, call it with a try and catch and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and wrap it with try. And if there is a problem, we can catch it. There we go. Let's go ahead and run the application. Now you can run it, I guess, in the Xcode preview, but I'm just going to run it in a simulator. And we'll be able to see that can we add a task or not. So let's go ahead and run the simulator. There we go, the simulator is running. Because once a task is added, we should be able to display it. So here we go, our application is loading. I'm just going to go ahead and say mow the lawn, and I'm just going to press the save button. Okay, I don't really see anything being displayed. Feed the dog, save. Okay, again, it might be saving, it might not be saving, we don't know. We can't really see anything happening. And the reason obviously is that we haven't really displayed it. I mean, we may have saved it, but it didn't really display anything. So our next step would be to display the task that we have saved. So how do we display the task that we have saved? Well, in order to display the task that we have saved, we first have to fetch all the tasks. Now, one of the things that you can use in core data is the property wrapper called a fetch request. And Swift team or the SwiftUI team and Apple team, Xcode team, they added these fetch requests so that you can use it in a SwiftUI application. So fetch request is simply saying that I need to fetch these things. We need to provide what entity are we fetching? Well, we're fetching the task entity, task.entity. Are we actually sorting it with anything? We're not sorting, so I'm just going to leave it blank, meaning empty array. And now I can call it private var task, which will be of type fetch results of task. So one of the good thing about this fetch request will be that every single time, any single time you're going to add a new task, it will automatically execute this fetch request and it will display it on the screen. So behind the scene, this fetch request is actually using the fetch results controller, which was used in UIKit. I mean, you can still use it over here, I guess, but it's mainly used in UIKit applications. But you can still use it over here, okay? It's not like you cannot use it. Okay, so after creating this fetch request, we have this variable, we have this property called task, which is of type fetch results. And the great thing about this task property is that we can just loop through it and we can just display all the different, tasks. So I'm going to go over here at the bottom somewhere, and I'm going to go ahead and say task. I will get access to the task. I'm just using a list control over here, you can see, and going to try to display task.title. Now, if you try to build this, it's going to tell you that the value of the optional string must be unwrapped, because when it created these classes, auto-generated these classes, it still created it as optional or nullable. So we're just going to go ahead and wrap this like this. null colsec operator. And now we can go ahead and run this. And there we go. You can see that we are able to display these tasks. Now, one of the cool things would be if I add another task. So let's say if I say do grocery, and if I save it, it automatically adds that task because the fetch request gets executed. Whenever we are changing whenever there are changes in our view context, the fetch request automatically gets executed and brings us the new task. So you can see that now any task that I'm going to add will be displayed automatically. So if I go ahead and add another task, let's say do exercise, automatically the fetch request gets executed and we can see all of that task being displayed. So this is because of the fetch request property wrapper that we used. Now, one of the things that we can actually add in our application is how we can go ahead and delete a task. In order to delete a task, what I'm going to do is instead of using this list, I'm just going to go ahead and create a plain list, but use a for each loop on the task. And you'll see in a moment that why I'm doing this. Task in, and then task.title. So this didn't really change anything. I mean, if I run the application right now, it's going to be the same exact thing. You can see it's the same exact output. The reason that I'm using for each is because in for each, there is a function you can call on delete. And when you implement this modifier, it will give you opportunity to swipe to delete. And now I can say index set dot for each. So whichever one that you're trying to delete, we're just going to go ahead and get the index. And using the index, we should be able to get task to delete because we have a task array. We pass in the index, and we can use view context dot delete and pass a task to delete. Now, just by calling view context.delete is not going to delete your task. This is going to simply tell the view context that this task must be deleted when you save the view context. So let's go ahead and save the view context. Just like before, view context when you're saving can throw an exception, so you have to make sure that you cache that exception. And when you save it, it is at that point, at that time, that it will save the task and the task will be deleted. So this part, view context.delete, is only marking the task that it needs to be deleted, but it's not really deleting the task. The actual persistence is going to take place when the view context.save is being called. Now, when I go ahead and run the application, you can see all the tasks, but since I have implemented on delete modifier, I can also swipe right to left and I can see the delete button. And I can delete it, and it will be deleted not only from the screen, but also from the database. Let's go ahead and add a task. Let's say feed the cat. You can see that I can still add the cat. I add the different tasks, and I can also delete the task. All right. So that is pretty much it, that what we are going to cover. And you can see that when you are using SwiftUI and you're using the provided property wrappers like fetch request, you are able to do a lot of different things much more easily in core data as compared to how you were using previously in UIKit. Now, yes, there are some limitations for these things. What you are doing over here is exposing your data models to the UI, which may not be best practice for larger applications. In those cases, you will have to do a little bit more digging, and you will have to implement the fetch results controller yourself. So that's something that is out of scope of this particular live session, but I have done that, and I've shown in my videos. All right. Now, if you want to learn more about core data and how it can be used in your application, I do have a discount code, a discount coupon, which is right there on your chat window that you can use, and you can get the complete course for core data that will allow you to learn more about core data if you want to. So definitely check that one out if you want to. That is definitely very, very helpful. I think the course is much longer, obviously. I think it's, let me double check it. So here is the list of the course. If you are interested, the link is right there in the description. Sorry, in the chat window. And the course is about 10 hours long, as you can see. All right. And it covers a lot of other stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about core data, then definitely watch that. And there are some miscellaneous sections over here in which I have discussed that how you can use MVVM design pattern using NS fetch results controller so that you can refresh your UI automatically. So that is also covered. All right. Apart from that, you can see it has one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, and so on. The link is right there on your chat window. And that is pretty much it. I hope you have enjoyed this small YouTube live stream. And let me know if you have any questions. But apart from that, that is pretty much it. Thank you again for coming. Hope you have enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll be back sometime in the future with new stuff. WWDC is, I believe, next week. So that will be really exciting. And it will have some new APIs to play around with. So I'll do a live stream on those things also. But that's pretty much it, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And let me know if you have any questions. You can follow me on Twitter at Azam Sharp. And that is pretty much it. Thank you.